Well, it's time now for our weekly health and fitness slot. The South African Society of Psychiatrists says anorexia, bulimia, and binge-eating disorders are silent diseases. The society cites media stereotypes of beauty and ideal body types as contributing factors to eating disorders, especially for people who are already vulnerable or at risk. Well, to talk more about this, we joined in the studio by a leading expert on eating disorders. That's Christopher Paul Sabu. He's, of course, a professor. He's at Wits University as well. Christopher, good morning. Thank you very much for coming in. The silent killers, I've seen an article that you've written that is written about some of your things, that these diseases are silent killers. Just an overriding question first. How serious a problem are these kind of disorders in our society today?
Okay, well, firstly, good morning. They are a problem because they affect a section of the population who are young, growing, so that is our young adolescent females. Also affects younger adult females as well. But these days, not exclusively a female group of conditions, also affecting men. So I think that when one looks, and also crossing, because previously these conditions were thought to affect only the white population, and I think what we've seen is that these conditions have spread into other populations.
And also some people may think they affect the people who are the haves.
Correct.
So to speak, because they can afford certain lifestyles.
Exactly. So I think what we're seeing is that the risk has spread to involve the entire community, not just a select group within the community.
Any insights on why the risk has spread to affect the entire population? Is it our lifestyles? Is it the new way of living?
Well, I think one of the factors, and it's always very difficult to be precise and say because of this that happened, but I think that we've seen a society that is increasingly urbanizing, increasingly modernizing, and I think that around the world in developing countries where you've seen the move towards modernization, you've seen the emergence of these kinds of conditions. So whereas previously they were thought to simply be located in the Western, urban, upper middle class, white, female group, this has now changed completely.
You've mentioned media stereotypes in one of when you speak about this, for instance, the role that the media plays in what's the right image, you know? And there's a reality, of course, that people say, you know, slim and thin is good, and on the other hand, if you're big and round, it's bad. Is it one of the new factors in the modern world? I'm thinking about social media and images and people posting their images.
Well, I think media has a powerful role in terms of projecting stereotypes of beauty. However, that doesn't mean that you as an individual have to conform. So I think that people have often asked me, is the media to blame? And I would say the media is not to blame in the sense that I can't say it's the media's fault that this is happening, because society also has a role to play. So I think it's really also up to there's the old expression, consumer beware. So I think that one has to have a greater media literacy in that sense to interpret what is in the media and what is for me.
Now, at home, I mean, it's about eating and stuff. Parents have a role to play, family has a role to play in assisting to prevent, or even if there is now an eating disorder, cure it.
Well, I think the family is always very important. So, excuse me, I would never lay the blame at the door of the family, but I would certainly see the family as being very important in terms of understanding the emergence of a problem and recognizing, and also assisting in any treatment interventions that would take place. So I see the family as very important, but from a therapeutic point of view, as much as anything else.
But then it's really up to the individual then to as you said, to not to conform to certain stereotypes, to look after themselves. But stresses can lead to changes in our eating patterns, can't it?
Stresses certainly can, but we're not really talking about eating that changes necessarily just because of stress that's happening right now. I think eating disorders are much deeper psychological conditions that speak to individual issues that might be triggered by stress, but there may be other underlying factors. But I just want to come back briefly to the family, and we want to talk about values. And things that are important, and what the family talks about, what the family values in the children within the home. So I think that also plays a role.
Okay, the underlying factors, what examples could you give? Why would somebody become anorexic, or somebody have a bulimia problem, for example?
Well, I think that self-esteem comes into it. So self-esteem certainly comes into it, and control issues, wanting to be in control of one's life. So there are a range of factors, but the biggest precipitant of an eating disorder is dieting. And I think,
tell us about that.
Well, I think that if one looks at the risks involved with dieting. You know, we live in a society where dieting is everywhere.
Yes.
There are diets all over the place, and everybody's telling us what we should and shouldn't be eating. And the truth of the matter is that when it comes to eating disorders, there was always an attempted diet that preceded the onset or signaled the beginning of the eating disorder. And the reality is that if you need to lose 2 to 3 kilos, or that's what you think, rather don't. Just leave it, because the risk of potentially, certainly in a young adolescent female, of developing an eating disorder, we don't know exactly who might be directly at risk, but we know that there's a large risk associated with dieting, because most dieting is not necessarily for health reasons. It's more for aesthetic reasons.
It's about the image.
It's about the image, and one has to be a little bit careful. So I spend
And the image talks to self-esteem, as you said.
Potentially, yes. And where I find value in myself is in my body or in how I look. And I think one has to be very, very careful. So I've got a very specific message which is more anti-dieting, although we live in a world which promotes dieting actively and promotes so-called healthy eating. But the truth of the matter is that an extreme preoccupation with healthy eating is in itself problematic. And there's a new condition which hasn't yet reached the diagnostic manuals. It's called orthorexia.
Orthorexia?
Orthorexia.
What is that?
It's an excessive preoccupation with healthy eating.
Wow.
So even healthy eating can become an illness. So I think one has to be very careful with these kinds of preoccupations.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. That's Professor Christopher Paul Sabo talking about eating disorders and how the fascination or focus on dieting may lead you into suffering from one of those disorders.